Hi, just a quick note before we get into this interview with Simon Hare. Occasionally, Simon drops below the noise gate at the end of a sentence or something, so it cuts it off a little bit. In most cases, you can extrapolate what he's saying. Most of the interview is fine. Where I thought necessary, I put a title in. Completely my fault. I should have made sure that the noise gate was adjusted properly and that he was more on mic than he was. People who talk lower than others, you have to make sure this. It's an individual circumstance. Completely my fault. Anyway, here we go. Simon Hare. All right, thanks for joining us here on the Mike on Mike program. If you are watching on Facebook, please go to the Mike on Mike page, like and follow that page, as that helps things get out and helps you get the program right when it comes out. We are going to discuss the controversy that's happening over the past few days since the letter came out. Welcome, Simon Hare, former commissioner, Josephine County.
Mike, I want to say it's a pleasure to be here, but it's a little challenging. I think these situations are not what anybody anticipated. I told the woman I plan to spend the rest of my life with and marry that don't worry about it. I'm just going to be the budget officer. It's not that big a deal. It's probably the most boring position in the county. It sure hasn't turned out to be that way.
Yes, it sounds like it. So if you would, I think many people are familiar with this situation. They've read your letter that got an incredible amount of coverage on Facebook and then other media outlets as well. Yeah. But make the case here. Tell me about what brought you to this.
Sure. Well, I think initially what started this was I was presented some budget documents that were almost 3 weeks late after the due date. All budgets were due. Well, we can back up. Why am I the budget officer? Really? That's because there was a ill-conceived voluntary resignation plan that I come to understand was proposed by Mr. Sellers, kind of to reflect what's going on at the federal level, but the local level is not the same. There's a lot of rumors about the fiscal situation in Josephine County being dire. These people have no idea what dire looks like. I was on the board in 2012 and 13 when we needed to lay off a significant portion of the employee population.
As I recall, it took the employee count from about 450 to 250 or thereabouts. It was
probably just a little under 300 at that point. So yes, and that was done during the budget cycle. On one particular day, it took me about 25 minutes to sign all of the pink slips, many of which, one of the hardest days I've ever had to do, just because I knew that there's a lot of families, many of which I knew potentially, my whole life, and I knew they'd never be this. And I've always tried to do things in Josephine County to where we never experience that kind of shortfall again. That voluntary resignation plan was rolled out with the ending of secure rural schools, which was a funding stream that Senator Wyden and Merkley put together after the ONC dollars, the shared receipts, were really in jeopardy. Right. They started out a whole lot more than what it ended up being at the tail end when it was not renewed. The shared receipts actually ended up being more money. So all the stuff I'm saying is not debatable. There is valid information that's out there. And
no, I understand about this. Everything went off a cliff in 2012.
It absolutely did.
They just stopped.
They stopped it.
Yeah.
And we had not done adequate things. I had just gotten on the board, and a line in my campaign was that, frankly, the board, not Casanelli, but Dwight Ellis and Dave Toller, my predecessor, were spending money like we were printing it in the basement. And that was just, there was nothing left. Like our last ending fund balance contingency, we had to do short-term borrowing in order to pay for the employees that we had. We had about 450, about what we have right now. It was said on the Bill Myers show that, we probably need about, or we probably can afford about half of what we have. That is such a misnomer, and it's just you can put it in the bucket of basically mistruths that have been sold. I've seen Herman Bertschiger say those things. I'm not saying it might not happen in the future, but I was the budget officer up until a couple of days ago. They're going to add, if they don't change it, and I don't know how they can hide it. So there's a draft budget that we have worked on, and with good qualified staff in the finance department, there's $1 million that's going to be added to the general fund carryover. There's also proposed $1 million to go into future expenditure, a future expenditure fund. So we're adding $2 million to our ending fund balance sheet. And so that dire perspective. The federal government passed a CR till September, and the only thing that I've heard so far that is going away is emergency management, which is a very small portion of the overall FTE, full-time employees.
So what you're saying is this continuing resolution that they're passing has SRS funding until the end of its cycle?
No, the SRS funding did go away, but the shared receipts funding came in as a substitute.
The actual O&C money.
Yeah, we got our payment in April. It was more money than we were anticipating to get for SRS. So even if SRS hadn't ended, we would have elected to take the shared receipts. We can always elect to take the higher number. Boards have always had that option. If the appropriation is smaller than the actual shared receipt number, counties elect the shared receipt number.
So for people who don't understand the shared receipts thing, there are like 18 O&C counties?
There are 18 O&C counties. There are, and that's Multnomah down to Jackson County at the very southern port. Mostly.
And they share in these shared receipts.
So it's not about how much timber revenue is generated in any one particular county. Most of the timber revenue comes from up north, Douglas County, Tillamook, and Clackamas, and some others. But they share that based on a formula. So it's a little complicated, but yeah.
Okay. So does that have something to do with population? Or different with tax bases, different tax bases?
Yep. Yes, it's based on population.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what prompted you to write the letter?
It basically was finally I had received, after bringing it to the chairman's attention, Mr. Black, that I was still waiting on all of the internal service fund programmatic budgets for the calendar year, for the next fiscal year, and those were under the purview of Director Sellers, and he finally got them to me. Not this last Wednesday, the Wednesday before last. He presented them to Ruth Nelson and myself, those documents that he alluded to, not knowing where they came from, and in Bill Meyer's interview. That's what he handed to me. His fingerprints and are literally and figuratively all over those documents. It's like something I made up.
Okay.
And
so
in that document illustrated a title, a name, and a salary and benefit compensation package. Salary at $254,000, total benefit package at $388,000 and change.
Right. So you're talking about that specific document, which I'll insert here so people can see that. You're saying that literally his hand. This is the big question. When I was watching Bill Meyer's show this morning, I'm wondering, how did the numbers get on the paper?
He put them there. He's responsible for those numbers as the program directors, and Andreas Bleck is also. So it's the same thing when any program submits their budget, be it veterans, public. It's hard to pick a program manager who's actually still there. So
how do you account for the fact that there isn't a history with county council about arbitrating a contract with this guy? Because as he said this morning,
he doesn't have to have a contract. None of our employees do.
Right, and he says he doesn't have a contract.
None of our employees have contracts. At least they have union contracts, but the non-unions don't. The contract.
Yes, but you suggested that that there was likely
There's a pending contract.
Yeah, negotiation going on with an outside counsel.
Yeah, I didn't make that up. Andreas Black told me that. I was in a meeting with John West on Friday a week ago at the boardroom at 4:00, and it was like a deer in headlights. The guy, I asked him, I said, how did you arrive at $254,000? And was that negotiated? And he said, yeah, it was a conversation.
That's a good point right here to visit this little piece of video. This is from 2 days ago. Or yesterday, I should say, yesterday's Bill Meyer program, when he is referencing the email that he got from John West. And let's listen to that.
Okay.
I did. And John West ended up sharing the the budget documents that Simon Hare apparently sent. And Simon sent that to me, too. Now, Commissioner Ron Smith says that this is not official. This is a placeholder. That's what he talked about. And that there's no $388,000 a year going to Michael Sellers right now. That's the claim, and that nothing has changed. Now, what former Commissioner West says, Bill, it's not true. Andreas signed the PR for his wage, and Michael is already receiving the pay. I have verified that. I was told there is a contract being drawn up by outside counsel with a buyout in it. I was told this last Friday by the person who is having it created. They have been caught. It makes me sick. The lies. And Holly better be careful. I will not let the taxpayers be cheated. The budget documents just verify the salaries all getting paid. Now, a Supreme Court justice only gets $180,000 a year. Marco blank. The lies deception is much. Simon's letter was 100% true. Sandy's letter is true. These four have put themselves before the citizens and the party. I will take them down if I have to and protect Josephine County as I always did. All right, Commissioner West, or former Commissioner West.
So that piece of video from the Bill Meyer show had a little glitch on the end of it because he said that right at the end of the program. And there's like about 4 seconds missing, which I cut out of there, which threw off the sync and everything on that clip. But what do you think of what you heard?
All I can speak to is what Andreas told John and I in the meeting, and he said that there is not a contract currently. There is one being worked on and negotiated with an outside counsel, and that the compensation was negotiated by Mr. Sellers, Chairman Black. It's $254 total compensation 3. I have not seen the PR myself. I have heard that was signed by Andreas, by reliable sources. There's got to be a paper trail. I understand that Sellers brought a pay stub. It's really kind of crazy that this person, here's an element of transparency. Michael Sellers is in charge of finance, HR, IT, and the board's office right now. You got the guy in charge of, he's in charge of everything. So I'm not speculating anything about what it is. I'm saying that's what I was told by reliable sources. I mean, the chairman himself told me this stuff. So
and you said that took place in a meeting. Is there a video record of that?
No, it's just, I brought a witness with me. We had this conversation. That's it. And I have the budget documents that corroborate that. So my goal, let me just say, my goal is that Michael Sellers is not paid $254,000 like I illustrated in my letter. There's no justification for that. The other goal that I have is there is never a contract. Don't tell me there isn't one right now. That's fine. That there's never a contract with Michael Sellers for this position with that kind of a compensation. And the other one is that all of this angst is at the feet of these commissioners not being transparent. They're not abiding by their own policies and regulations. Clearly, there should be no room in this county for this kind of discrepancy between the truth and allegations. It isn't clear. They haven't been following proper procedures. I was on the board for 8 years. We never did anything close to this. So you remember the good old days when we had, and I can't believe I'm referring to them as the good old days, when we had Dale Matthews, Sandy Casanelli, Paul Walters, Ward Ockington, Ellen Scott. yourself, Judy Aarons, Vivian Kirkpatrick Pilcher. We had a team of people watching us on the board. If we stubbed our toe on the way on into the ambassador, people would know about it. This is huge. We've got people who are being fired, negotiated settlement agreements. We've got this voluntary resignation plan that cost the county taxpayers $633,000 when they could have done all of those actions for substandard employees for free. There is no excuse for this kind of, if we're so broke, why are they spending money like we were printing it in the basement? It just, they're handing out huge salaries that are unjustified, and they're paying compensations. They're gonna compensate people for not working, and then they're gonna replace them. What I find is a travesty is that the DA was waiting last week to fill a position. He couldn't get clarity from the board, and meanwhile, a pet project of the chairs, the airports, self-professed conflict of interest. He hires and replaces the past director in record time, and with no evaluation as to whether or not a federally funded, all of our money comes from the FAA pretty much for the airports, is looked at being combined with another program that is also federally funded, transit, round hole, round peg if you want to be efficient, Chairman Black.
I want to play, there's another clip here where they sort of speak to, they speak to the reasoning behind abdicating their authority to Andreas Black.
I like the word abdicating as opposed to delegating. Good use.
Let's see if this is the one.
This of what is going on, and is, you may not be able to comment on this. I don't know. Is it true that the two county commissioners ended up ceding their authority to Andreas Black? That two of the three ended up ceding their authority to this in order to not have to have these kind of conversations, whether it's about current employees or employees that they think will need to be cut. Did that happen the way it was described by people to me, including Simon Hare and others?
I don't think it happened the way that they described it. So I was there when it happened, and what was presented was, we have to make organizational change. We have to be ready for the change.
Did you see what he was? Here's all the people that we need to let go. That's the end of that sentence. Self-enough. And why not have that conversation? You know why they can't have that conversation? In our charter, it says that the board is supposed to be evaluating for the performance of our managers annually. They haven't done that years now. And that's the backstop for making the decisions. If a public health director is underperforming, where's the track record? Yeah, all of these actions is for lazy government. It's not doing the diligence, trying to put these people who are underperforming on a plan of action. It's just slash and burn, the easiest way possible. And it takes work, honestly, Mike, to run a county. And what they're doing is they're skirting the process. So
in the rest of this clip, he kind of explains the reasoning why they did it. And I'd like to hear your
Sure, I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, no worries.
Change. We have to be ready for the change that's coming. And so there are things that we need to do to make our county more efficient and more functional. And so to do that, there needs to be reorganization of certain departments. And so there was a motion made to...
Can you put a pause on it? We need to be ready for the changes that are coming. These are expedited changes now. What changes that are going to come so dramatically in the future that they won't be able to act on them? I don't understand the rationale. All of the budget that we're proposing is known funding. The general fund is the ultimate backstop for programs that are vital to public service. There's built-in time by the backstop of the general fund reserve. So it isn't like, and there's no impediment to a lack of funding to reduce staff in an expedited fashion. If you find yourself without funding, it isn't like it takes some big long process of adjudication or deliberation. I'm sorry, there aren't funds to fund your program anymore. You're done. So all of this that you're hearing is just make up gobbledygook to address, to reinforce, to try to justify actions that are unjustifiable.
So just for the sake of clarity, what I get that he is suggesting in this clip is that they needed to give Andreas Bleck the authority in order to expedite the downsizing of these departments, the firing, for the lack of a better term, these employees that are deemed superfluous when looking at future budgets, and so you're suggesting that there's no need for that
No, we've never done that before. This is not the first time Josephine County is downsized.
Okay, so then he's giving that as a rationale, but is there validity at all to that rationale?
That's what I'm saying. There isn't.
Okay.
Other than a laziness in going through the process and having it publicly discussed, the fact that we don't need a code enforcement officer positions, that should be weighed and measured in the public eye of discourse. It isn't funded.
So in 2012, when you guys had to let go a large number of employees, and I remember that all happened very quickly.
It did.
So what is the difference between that circumstance of that funding shortfall, the cutoff of government money, to today?
Nobody knows what they're doing at the leadership. Michael Sellers has never done this before. He says he's qualified. He's an IT manager, an emergency services manager. He's managed a small amount of staff for a chief or a senator. His resume that I haven't seen, I don't think you've seen it, that justifies this operations manager position. We had Rosemary Paget. I was underqualified as a commissioner at the time, but for somebody and a whole team of people that we had a good HR person and others that guided the reduction process.
So in 2012, when you guys had to do that, what's the procedure? Who brings to you and says, we need to get rid of this many people, or do you determine that? Somebody else determine that? And does somebody then bring recommendations to you and then you execute on that?
They bring them to the board.
I see.
I was appointed the chair after Sandy Castanelli left. We did the reductions the following year. I had made an appointment of Don Reedy and Harold Haugen. Harold had been experienced in staffing, obviously, having done the commissioner position for 22 years. I don't want to put too much pressure on or fault in these two newly elected commissioners. They don't know. That's fine. But they need to get qualified personnel around them and good advice. And when I was trying to offer advice to them, it was not taken. And so Rosemary Paget and I, as the chair, would work on a proposal that we brought back to the board, Don Reedy and Harold Haugen. And then we wrote it into the budget and it was executed. And that's how this process is done in a transparent, deliberative way. There's been no deliberations in public about any one of these downsizing. Where was the board? They've acquiesced on all of these, either behind closed doors. I'm only speculating. How do they arrive at the conclusion that they're going to combine community corrections and juvenile detention? This is a brainchild of Andreas Bleck and Michael Sellers. And then it's just carried out by Andreas with zero objection by Ron Smith and Chris Barnett.
Yeah,
Goodwin's position is a levy-funded position.
As I recall, though, this combining of departments was happening even before the new board came in.
But this board hasn't weighed in as to whether or not it's an appropriate thing that they endorse.
Right.
And it needs to be kind of piece by piece. I know.
Well, the only one who had experience with it previous to this was Andreas Bleck, because he was in there as an appointee during some of it.
I'm glad you raised that issue, because that's where this operations really kind of got a foothold in a previous board's discussion. but this board hasn't talked about it at all. It really starts over when this next, two people took office, and those deliberations have never really happened, as far as I'm aware. I don't watch every meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, but I have a sneaky suspicion that there's more going on behind the scenes than it's actually being deliberated in the public's view and decided. And that's really the angst. That's where the pressure comes back to this board, that they're not being transparent.
Okay, but when you're offloading 200 employees, as in back in the day, you're not making each individual piece of sausage there. You're plowing that through as one big deal.
And they're not letting go of 200 employees right now. I think they probably let go of like 6 on purpose. The other ones were voluntary resignations, many of which will have to be replaced. They're mandated services. Some of them they're waiting on, like there's a shortage in the juvenile shelter and detention facility, and there's mandated ratios about staffing levels to youth. And my speculation is I'm not sure they're meeting those obligations right now because of this consternation in the board and it not being a priority of the chair. Chair's, hired this airport manager. Meanwhile, we're waiting on a DA person. We're waiting on juvenile shelter or detention people that need to be filled.
Okay,
it's
but
messy.
So I get it. It's real easy to shove this off on the board, but the board only puts things on the agenda that are suggested to them, and they go, "Okay, yeah, that's a good idea."
That's not true. No. These are administrative commissioners. If you look around the state, there's a lot of different structures of a board. They don't have a county manager because they take on that responsibility and they're compensated as such.
I see. Is that related to their liaison duties? So if you have a law enforcement liaison, then...
Liaison is a tool in the tool chest. They're administrative. We've refined the liaison program and it's gotten out of control, I guess.
But what I'm saying is, if something is a priority needing to happen, as you alluded to in juvenile justice,
yes.
Who brings that topic to the
director does, and that has been done.
Yeah. And
that has been done.
That has been done, but not acted on, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it had been waiting in the queue, and they'll prove me wrong that they say that it doesn't. That wasn't the case and stuff. They're very good at covering their tracks because there's one guy who's in charge of all these things who's able to do that. But if you talk to Jim Goodwin, he'll absolutely say that they were waiting. They have a culture of fear right now, given that the people that they're letting go, retaliation. And like in my letter, I said, any claim of a hostile work environment, I would err on the side of truth by that claim as opposed to otherwise. I know I'm putting the county at potential risk in this. Like I started out, my intent is that Michael Sellers does not get a $254,000 salary. My intent is that there is no contract signed. And my intent is that these commissioners who do not know how to do their job, they are not qualified, are no longer represented.
Let's play another one of these clips and you can respond.
You sent me, a copy of your pay stub. Now, according to my, I'm just multiplying this. You're at about $172,000 a year, right? Is that roughly speaking where you are?
Yes.
Okay. $388,000 though is what Simon Hare ended up putting out there. So I guess my question is, where did that number come from, in your opinion? Because you must have had some access to that. Maybe you know where that came from. And is $172,000 your stated wage and $388, let's say, total compensation? Because we know that employee costs are considerably beyond what just the standard cost. Mm-hmm. And by the way, 172 is not out of line, even with some other cities when it comes to administrators. You're essentially doing an administrator's job right now, maybe without the title yet. I don't know. Tell me what you think.
Well, yeah, I'm not the county administrator. Josephine County doesn't have a county administrator. I'm running numerous departments, but I'm not the county administrator. There isn't one. There's a number of departments that report directly to the board. So that's not the case. I don't know where that number came from. I really can't speak to whatever that document was that was on the internet appears yesterday, because There is personally identifiable information of county employees and elected officials on it. And so I anticipate that there will be civil, if not criminal action around it. So I really can't comment on that. With regard to that number, they have a cost calculation that people do. It's in budgeting, they call it the fully loaded numbers.
Yeah. What's the fully loaded number? 172 times what? Is it like 1.3? Like 30% extra cost, 40% extra cost? What would you say?
I would say it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40% extra cost. I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay, so I'll just multiply it just to be on the safe side here. Okay, that would put total. Let's say on the high side, if it was 40% of wages ends up being for a total cost of benefits, PERS, all these other things, that would put you at 240. Okay.
Okay.
All right, that's total compensation, but that would be like anybody. My total compensation is more than what my pay stub says. Okay, that's the way this works. You sent me.
So in a later clip, he suggests that is what he's getting paid right now. In the clip that we heard, the email that Bill Meyer got from John West, he suggested that he has seen paperwork that says that's what he's getting paid now, this $388,000.
We wouldn't be talking here, Mike, if that was the case. Andreas, a week ago, 4 o'clock at the boardroom with him and John, he told John and I point blank that he's getting $254. I have it from staff at the county.
That he's getting $254 right now.
He's getting two.
He's suggesting that he's getting $240 all told. Roughly.
I don't know. This 172 number I'm not familiar with.
Right.
I've heard 185. That just comes back to the
right. So Bill did the math on this pay stub that he had and said 172 roughly.
Right.
And then 30% takes you up to 240 or 40% or whatever. But that's a far cry from 254 and 388. We wouldn't be talking if what was the case.
If he was getting 172. Bill's right. That's probably within the comparison. There's nothing to talk.
So a little bit of confusion that I have when I see these numbers, because it does say budget on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's why I clarified with it.
And so in my mind, especially being this time of year, and I've seen this happen a number of times, there is a budget proposal,
absolutely,
which I assume says, well, now this guy is doing, instead of 2 jobs, he's doing 4 jobs. And just because you have those titles doesn't necessarily mean, in my mind, that you should have that pay coming.
Right.
Maybe they suggested that perhaps he's holding some of these titles for convenience sake while you do this process.
That's really ironic. That's really odd, because all of this can be done by a simple HR manager. Everything he's doing as far as hiring or budgets as a finance director. What is the need for an operations manager title to do anything that he's done so far? I know that Mark Stevens' resignation or termination letter was signed by Michael Sellers as the operations manager. Well, say for instance he was the new county manager. There'd be a comp on that would include Yamhill County. Ken, who is the current Yamhill County administrator, who oversees everything under the board. I don't know that there is a staffer that works for the board. They all work for Ken, the county manager. And he's been doing it for 7 years. He was the deputy administrator before that. He comes highly qualified, having a lot of experience. He's making $200. Yamhill is our highest county comparator. To go anywhere else and try to look for a higher number is inaccurate and self-serving for the person who's looking to get that position. It's just not justifiable at all, and certainly not for Josephine County.
So this isn't born out of a cabal with you and John West and Sandy Novak to bump certain people out of the county so that you can come in and take the positions later?
You mean no?
I mean, this is speculated by some people out there that, and you did mention in your interview with the Daily Courier that should these positions become available, you would be open to being appointed.
Yeah, it was never my intent. I regret now that I supported Chris Barnett. I never supported Ron Smith for any position, and I do support John West. I think he needs a lot of coaching in some respects on what he does and how he says it. But he sure tries to do the right thing, and I don't think we always get to pick our bedfellows as far as what side we're on. I'm on the side of transparency, on the side of fiscal responsibility, and those two things are accomplished.
Now, there is an element going on in this county that the more left-hand view of things is ecstatic that this is going on. They love the fact that you dropped that. You're their new boy. You're Elon Musk when electric cars were cool and he was saving the planet. You know what I'm saying?
It's unfortunate that this has gotten any kind of political. And Mr. Sellers said it was a strategy to divide the right. I don't understand how anyone can have this perspective that they want transparency, they want efficiency, and it doesn't matter who's doing it right or wrong. We call balls and strikes. And if it is predominantly right-leaning people who are in office and doing bad things, we hold everybody accountable, especially our own. I don't understand why that's a different perspective. It's only that of people who are in the right camp, who give it a bad name, who are in it from a cultish standpoint. I'm not a huge political person. I'm a huge Josephine County person. I've always been that way. I've never sought support from the conservative side of the aisle or the left side of the aisle. I really haven't. Well, it was convenient back in the day because the Republican Party, when I ran, was pretty dysfunctional. And, I got to give Holly credit for the national perspective, and she jumped on that wave of getting our local party kind of together. I have not always supported their perspective. I think the young man who's running Treasury and Tax is a good person, just struggling. And I thought Eve Arce was a good person, but had a challenge with the board that, in a lot of respects, there's blame on both sides for them not being able to navigate that. I never had a problem with John Harrelson or her predecessor or Eve Arce. There was always disclosure.
When you're on social media,
I try not to go on.
Yes, I understand the notion there.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that assign nefarious intent to this circumstance, but this isn't the only one. As you well know, when you were a commissioner, a lot of people lay that on whoever is in charge is the bad guy, and they're behind closed doors. They're planning to do such and such. Most
of the time, that's because they don't have anything else to come back with. Like, if you ask,
because they don't know.
They don't know, but they haven't been given an opportunity by the commissioners to speculate otherwise. Like, where was the public discussion to combine juvenile shelter and detention facility with corrections and put Director Hyde in charge? I don't believe that there was ever a discussion.
I don't know. Now, pardon my...
That's a pretty major thing to do. Now, of course...
Understood. Pardon my ignorance on it. Did that happen pre or post this new board?
It just happened a couple of weeks ago.
Now, see,
I actually heard...
That shows you how much I'm paying attention to all this.
There's a lot going on, and, one of the reasons coming forward right now is that I kind of had to provide some information to the public about what's going on to try to put some brakes on some of these things that might be, not in the best interest of the citizens. The subject we're talking about right now, combining those two programs, that was also a way it was done back in 2007. But the juvenile detention facility didn't have a levy tied to it as a funding stream. So what are you talking about reducing a salaried person that's funded by a levy for fiscal reasons or corrections being funded by the state as a reduction in fiscal reasons? They're actually talking about, their resources and revenues potentially going up because of a formula. They're not going about it in a transparent and honest fashion.
At the end of one of these clips, Michael Sellers suggests that the county may be taking some legal action against you on the basis of a release of confidential information.
I would love the opportunity for discovery. So, yeah, that would be really interesting. Probably short their part.
Yeah, perhaps an intimidation tactic of sorts. And
standard operating procedure.
Standard operating procedure, yes. So let me ask you, do you regret anything about your letter and releasing it in the way you did? Or
like I said in I think it was the second paragraph, the urgency came from the standpoint that Andreas Bleck told John West and I that they were working on a contract. John's perspective is that they can't sign a contract without the full board doing it. They've taken a bunch of actions that should have included by their own policies the actions of the full board, creating this operations manager position. Where's the job description been approved by the full board? That hasn't happened. And if this board, brought with this attention, did not want this thing to go forward, they would have rescinded Andreas's authority. And they have not done that. They've met several times as a board since my letter came out.
And I sort of get this on the level that nobody likes some guy coming in trying to tell him what to do, and
I totally get that.
Yeah, and it may well be that they're resistant to the suggestions on the basis that they've got this line cut, and maybe they're not going to be objective enough to part from that to say, okay, what this guy's saying is a good idea. Or, maybe they just think that everything that you tell them is bunk.
Find out.
Yeah, I guess we will.
Yeah, we'll find out.
You've got all new people.
Right.
And they all have an idea in their mind about how this thing's going to go. You've been watching politics for 15 years, and you think you know what's wrong with politics. And I understand that's a very difficult thing to come to if you've never been on the inside of it.
Right.
I'm sure the perspective is entirely different.
I think originally Andreas had some pretty honorable perspectives and stuff. The thing about it is I don't think he's ever going to, if asked, he will not go back on his word to John and I that there hasn't been discussions of a contract for Michael Sellers. If you listen to the end of that interview with Bill Meyer, Michael alludes to the idea that, don't you think I need one, given all of this pushback and challenge? Well,
I'm sorry, don't you think I need one what?
A contract.
Oh, gotcha.
Every manager feels that way. Don't you think Rob Brandis wished he would have had a contract to get him to 30 years, not be 29 and 7 months?
Right.
Don't you think,
yes.
Mark Stevens at Planning Community Development would have loved a contract, or Weber? You're in public service for a reason. And that's another thing about this exorbitant salary and benefits package. You're not Danny Jordan. I've followed Danny Jordan since he was appointed to that position by C.W. Smith back in the day. Danny Jordan is worth that compensation every day of the week and twice on Sunday. He's coming up with stuff like outsourcing and doing a employee non-union clinic that has brought down their health insurance costs by 50%.
Last May, the county voted pretty overwhelmingly that they weren't really interested in the 5 commissioner and 1, county manager position. And
there was about 8 different reasons to vote against that charter proposal, one of which was the fact that there was a small little clause that said that every capital purchase needed to go before the voters. Capital purchase defined by the State Department of Revenue is in excess of $100 or a lifespan of over
oh, good
a year.
Lord.
Every purchase. So if you bought a Costco box full of pens,
you'd have to have an election.
Yeah.
Yeah,
$30,000.
Yeah, that's silly.
Short side.
That's silly. obviously.
I didn't vote against the 5. I think that there's probably merit to 5. It has to be done the right way. I didn't vote against a county manager. I voted against it for that reason. So to speculate that people are not in favor of a county manager, I've heard it for a long time. I don't disagree. I don't think Josephine County needs a county manager. I think our best days were under people like Rosemary Padgett and Marie Hill. Marie Hill was a previous chief operations officer, and Rosemary Padgett was our chief financial officer. Those were probably some of our best in Josephine County's history. I'm not advocating against something like that, saying that that job description needs to be approved by the full board. There needs to be an advertisement for that position and its opening. The whole board needs to interview for those applications, and then they need to select it based on the people that apply. It's the antithesis of that process, and it reinforces the stereotypical good old boy narrative that we have as a reputation, earned or otherwise. It's just reinforced by what's been going on. And that's the tragedy. It could be done a different way, and it should have been.
Well, there you have it, folks. We don't want to put people to sleep.
Probably too late, but I can talk like this forever.
Yes.
I appreciate the invitation, Mike.
This is a very interesting... Yeah, it is.
Complicated thing, and I don't expect everybody to come up to speed, but I did not do what I did lightly. It was with good counsel, a lot of prayer. It has not been fun. I didn't wish this on myself, for sure. I begged and pleaded with Chris Barnett and Andreas Bleck to not allow this to go forward. Rescind Andreas's authority. Chris had the opportunity on Tuesday at 1:30. He and I were discussing it in his office for practically an hour about what is the thing that you need to do under other on the agenda. You have the authority to do this, Chris. Just ask to redress the delegated authority granted to Andreas Bleck to do these things. That meeting came and went. Chris did not make that action. I walked into Wally Hicks's office and I said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Wally. I think they gave me no choice but to resign. I'm looking out after the best interest of the taxpayer in Josephine County. There is no other motivation for me. Like I said, I've said it several times, I'm pretty clear on my reasoning, what I'm looking for. No contract, no exorbitant compensation, and this board held to it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And I'm sure it's been very informative. If you understand half of the language that was going on there, you cannot have a discussion with Simon Hare about county politics without getting lost.
Sorry.
Unless you know a lot about this or you follow it very closely, because you're dealing with the minutia of all of it.
That's what's really tragic about this, is I thought I was cultivating a relationship and a friendship with Michael Sellers, somebody who I think understands at least 50-75% of what I'm talking about. And I didn't think we were adversarial until I saw that number on those documents that he handed me.
I appreciate you talking to me, and this adds another piece to the puzzle. I've been encouraging people on Facebook to not take this in one bite. And don't make a judgment on the basis of one single piece of information. And this is another piece it all together.
And it's not over.
Yeah, no, it isn't over. This isn't going to be over for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate it very much, Simon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.